What if I told you Edward Weevil was actually a failed Mads experiment, a failed attempt in cloning the world's strongest man, Whitebeard? Today, I'm going to tell you the heartbreaking story of Whitebeard, Weevil, and Miss Bakken. I've spent the last 72 hours diving deep into this mystery, and it's finally time to expose everything. Let's start off by asking, who is Miss Bakken? Bakken is a 76-year-old woman, a former pirate, and she's also short. Oda, what is up with you making these old people shrink into these goblin elf-shaped figures? Here's my theory for Miss Bakken. She was once the scientist of the Rock's crew, similar to Frankie for the Straw Hats or Queen for the Beast Pirates. And keep this in the back of your mind for now, as it will be important later. In chapter 1072, we received huge shocking revelations. Stussy from CP0 is actually a clone of Miss Buckingham Stussy, a former member of the Rock's pirates. With all this cloning going on, legends like the Rock's crew are now involved, and you know what this means, right? Blackbeard versus Rock. Zoro is a clone of Ryuma, and Luffy is a clone of Roger? All jokes aside, I really do think Miss Buckingham Stussy is actually Miss Bakken or Bucken, depending on how you pronounce it, and by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why. With Bucken and Buckingham sounding so similar, we have a first clue. They both had blonde hair, and finally, they were both members of the Rock's crew. This was implied when Marco stated in chapter 909 that Miss Bakken, or Weevil's mother, was on the same crew as Whitebeard close to 40 years ago. And what was going on nearly 40 years ago? That's right, the God Valley incident. Once the God Valley incident was revealed in chapter 957, the picture became a lot more clear that 40 years ago these two pirates shared some kind of history together. I know an argument against Bakken being Stussy is the size comparison, but let's be real, if Oda could turn the masculine Yakuza boss Yokoro into a shriveled up Yoda form, then I'm sure he could do the same with a seductive Stussy, where we see that Miss Bakken now looks like a ball of crumpled paper right before you say Kobe. She is almost like 80 to be fair, and I think Oda just does this to exaggerate the features of his old characters. Plus, if these are two separate characters, that would mean that both Miss Bakken and Miss Buckingham Stussy were likely both on the Rock's pirates, with Whitebeard sailing the seas around the same time, or even weirder, at separate times. So is Bakken a second cloned model of the original Stussy, or even completely separate characters entirely? Maybe they're sisters? Sure, I guess all of these options are possible, but for now, so this doesn't get too confusing, and to make this video a lot more interesting than it would be otherwise, I'm going to make an educated hypothesis that Miss Bakken and Buckingham Stussy are indeed one and the same, and I'm just going to refer as the old lady that we saw with Weevil as Miss Bakken, and I'm going to refer to Stussy, the Unit 1 clone of Miss Buckingham, as simply just Stussy. All of this got my mind racing, because what does this revelation mean for Weevil? Does this mean that Whitebeard was truly Weevil's father, or even crazier, is Weevil a failed Frankenstein-like experiment gone wrong? A failure to clone the strongest man, Edward Newgate, a greedy Miss Bakken aiming to create a powerful and obedient child for her own personal gains. Soon enough though, you'll realize that Edward Weevil is the biggest clue tying Stussy and Bakken together as the same character. But before I tell you why Weevil is a failed Mads clone of Whitebeard, make sure that you subscribe if you have not already. YouTube's notifications have been glitching out lately, so turn them off and then turn them back on, and let me know if that fixes any issues. We have plenty of videos planned, including theories like this. I have a Prime Kobe video in the works. Wizard of Wars is working on a mega theory if I've ever seen one, so trust me, you're gonna want to hit that bell like Luffy and Skypiea to be notified every time a new video is uploaded. At first glance, Weevil does look like Whitebeard a bit. The iconic long white mustache, that long blonde hair, and to be fair, that long blonde hair could also have came from Stussy or Miss Bakken. But when you take a closer look, it's not hard to see that something is off here. Weevil looks more like a parody of a How to Train Your Dragon character rather than the masculine force of nature that is Whitebeard. If we're being 100% honest, Weevil looks a lot more like the result of Whitebeard and Queen doing the fusion dance. He's fat, he looks like a straight up bumbling idiot, and he has stitches and scars almost as if he's a Thriller Bark zombie. In fact, I would even go as far to say that he resembles many similarities to Mortia's Ors giant who had been transformed from the inside out. Weevil's personality seems so one-note, simple, and bland that I just can't look at Whitebeard and then look at Weevil without thinking that there's something seriously wrong here. And speaking of Weevil looking like Queen, it would be kind of interesting if Queen, who was a mad scientist alongside Vegapunk, once helped to create Weevil. We could even throw in Judge here, who specializes in cloning. We now know for a fact that Stussy has some past connection to the Mads, with the reveal that they used her to create the first successful Mads clone. With Stussy turning on CP0 and helping out Vegapunk, it makes me wonder if we're going to see Weevil and Bakken before before the end of the Egghead arc. And as wrong as this sounds, it makes Miss Bakken a lurking legend. Weevil is like a chimera science freak, a monster that should have never been brought into this world in the first place. The experiment would have taken place before Stussy was created, and you have to imagine that it must have taken years to master the cloning technology that Judge and Vegapunk now possess. And with testing and experiments comes failures, many failed tests that came before the final result was achieved. You may see Vegapunk as this quirky, fun ally to Luffy as he's about to join up with the Straw Hats and Bonnie. But to me, Vegapunk is a lot more like a heartless, evil man, someone who's created child soldier slaves who are sold off to the government and forced into battle. We see they have personalities of their own, but imagine being brought into the world with the sole reason to fight, obey, and die. It's a sick twisted reality, but just because it's Vegapunk and just because he knows about the Void Century, he's cool with Kuma, he tells the Straw Hats about Ohara, he knows Sao, he's a fun, Einstein, quirky man, so therefore we see him as a good guy. But creating a monstrosity like Weevil would really be right on brand with Vegapunk's character, as well as the entire mad scientist group. I mean, the name Mads implies that they all fit the crazy scientist trope. Vegapunk might look good in comparison to Caesar, Judge, and Queen, but that's not really all that hard to do. He's maybe the least evil of the four, but that doesn't mean he isn't a messed up guy. And with the reveal that Stussy is the first successful clone, I just want to point out some very subtle foreshadowing from Oda. During the Whole Cake Island events, we see Stussy and Big Mom speaking on casual terms, and it's mind-blowing going back and seeing this because Big Mom is seeing an old crewmate in Stussy. And this is also especially interesting from Big Mom's point of view when you consider how trippy this would be, and it makes me reevaluate the entire context of Stussy being invited to the wedding. And speaking of the devil in the details, in chapter 1070's cover story, we get to see what seems like the mad science group in their earliest years. We see Caesar, Judge, Queen, and even Vegapunk, and they all look very young. And there's one mysterious figure whose face is not shown. Remember how I said that Miss Bakken might have been the scientist on the Rock's crew? Well, this mysterious mad member with the stockings and the hair, it does seem like this is the original Stussy. It's likely that Miss Bakken actually has this vampire devil bad fruit because it would have been part of Miss Bakken's lineage factor. And seriously guys, if I see one more sim saying something like Stussy could suck my blood anytime, you guys are down bad. But I guess Whitebeard, he might have also agreed with you in the distant past. Now I'm going to reveal to you the biggest tragedy, something so heartbreaking, something about Whitebeard that will make you see him in an entirely new light. But before that, consider leaving a super thanks in the comments of one of your hottest One Piece takes. Each super thanks will have a chance to be featured in our next video, and check out our Patreon as well. Our dream is to go full time on YouTube, but we need your help to make that come true. We'll make sure all the money raised through Patreon and super thanks go towards making our channel even better and getting out more videos on a consistent basis. It's still strange to me that the entire theme surrounding Whitebeard's character is family. Even when he set out to sea, he was made fun of by the other pirates for searching for his treasure, which was a family. This was the thing that he always wanted since a young boy. To most pirates seeking gold and riches and fame, Whitebeard was just an orphan, a poor child without ever knowing his mother or father. So what makes this Weevil situation all the more heartbreaking is a few different possibilities. It's possible that Whitebeard just can't have children, meaning that he's infertile. And this would be horrible, as it would mean the man with the dream of a family was prevented from this reality through pure biological dysfunction. A harsh truth that he would have to come to grasp with over time, and this could be a reason for Whitebeard adopting so many young orphans. It might have been quite literally his only way of starting a family that he's always dreamed of. But another tragic possibility would be that Bakkens left Whitebeard and took their child Weevil without ever saying a word to Whitebeard. But where this really gets dark is that in chapter 909, Marco confirmed that Whitebeard never had a family, even though he knows a Miss Bakken. And so isn't it strange that Weevil only showed up after Whitebeard's death? This is the most suspicious aspect to Weevil, Whitebeard, and Miss Bakken's relationship, because why couldn't Miss Bakkens have introduced Weevil to Whitebeard sometime before, when he was one of the most notorious pirates in the world? Out of every One Piece character, it doesn't make any sense that Whitebeard of all people would be a deadbeat dad, abandoning his own biological child and instead adopting dozens of hopeless children without raising his own. Whitebeard was someone who lived and died for his family and sons. And so Miss Bakkens, assuming that he was loaded with riches and treasure, but real ones of the Whitebeard pirates closest to Newgate know that he was pumping all of his money into his own hometown and spending the rest on booze. You can tell that she is straight up a gold digging bitch. She even admits this in saying, "What's the use in revenge? It won't get you a single berry. Money is what matters." To be fair to Bakken, she is a pirate, and so this could have been seen as stereotypically piratey greed and the dream of striking it rich, but from what Oda is showing us, it seems like money and greed is all she cares about, a core part of her character, as it's one of the first things we see of her. Could it be a subversion similar to Nami, who we know isn't necessarily greedy with the Straw Hat Pirates? Well, maybe, but at the moment it's not looking good for the former Rocks pirate who seemingly hid herself and Whitebeard's so-called son from the world. Also, isn't it strange that Weevil is 35 years old, but the Rocks pirates split up after they were disbanded and defeated at God Valley, which happened 38 years ago. I guess it is possible that Whitebeard and Bakken were in love, and so maybe they could have been together for a few years after, but it's just hard to judge without the full context of what actually went down at God Valley. It seems like all the members of the Rocks crew completely split up, but with the context that Whitebeard went into his prime a few years after the God Valley incident, I honestly don't think that he was just settling down with Miss Bakken, and instead he must have been fighting some of his most powerful battles to reach his prime. When we think of how Haki and Devil Fruit Awakenings work, it's likely that this was the time when Whitebeard was fighting legends like Sengoku, Roger, or Garp as they were sailing across searching the new world, and these were the people who could have pushed Whitebeard without the Rocks at his side to his fullest potential. This was also most likely the era when he started his own crew and began adopting young orphans like Marco and Jozu, so he had to become more powerful and continue to train if he was going to protect these young weak children and become their father. And when we look at how young everyone looked in the Mad Science cover story, it's actually possible that the Mad Science group existed around the same time that Weevil was created, as if he truly is a failed clone experiment from 35 years ago. Another reason though why I believe that Weevil is a failed clone similar to the Seraphim creations is because Weevil's personality is lacking so damn hard to the point where it seems like he's stuck in the mind of a whiny child. I mean, maybe Weevil is legitimately suffering from something like missing chromosomes or some kind of mental blockage here, as it could have been one of the first trials at cloning. I don't know, it just seems like he has so many mental downsides compared to Whitebeard, and it just would explain why Weevil is the way he is. He's physically said to be a beast, even resembling a young Whitebeard in this aspect. From what we've seen, he doesn't even have a crew, but he does have his mother right by his side. The best way that I could describe Weevil is an overgrown man-child. No matter which way I look at the Weevil Bakken scenario, it's heartbreaking for Whitebeard, because in one situation Miss Bakken attempted to recreate Whitebeard for her own selfish power and greed and failed, creating an abomination of a science experiment. But if you look at this through the lens of Weevil actually being Whitebeard's son, it's arguably even more tragic to think that the one thing Whitebeard dreamed of, which was a family, was ripped out of his life. And so then he started a crew with the intention of adopting his children to fill this lonely void. And even if Whitebeard never knew about Weevil, even this scenario paints Miss Bakken as the villain. I can't see a way where Whitebeard wins here, and the same goes for Weevil. He's either a scientific monstrosity or he's been lied to and deceived by his own mother, never being able to meet his father. And what's even more insane is the fact that now Weevil is essentially become a bounty hunter, chasing down the remnant Whitebeard pirates one by one, hoping to find a lead on a grand treasure that doesn't even exist. It's tragic in every sense you could think of for everyone involved here. The Weevil tragedy is that he truly believes that he is Whitebeard's son now, as he even compared his facial hair. But what he never knew is that his mother, Miss Bakken, had been manipulating right in front of his eyes the entire time. If you liked anything I said here, like the video to get it out to as many people as possible. And if you like Whitebeard as much as I do and think he deserves better than this gold digging whore, click on this video to find out what the One Piece is and how Whitebeard already told us what it is back in Marineford.